Sorry for that. Our next feature reader is Andrea Monique, an author of Memory and Metaphor 2018, two participants 2018, and an innumerable unpublished stories. Here, take it away, Andrea.
Hi, the last name is Monticue. Just wanted to correct that.
Sorry.
Also, I don't know where Charlene got the information, but we don't live in Portland. We live way out in the rural part of Oregon, a town about 20, 30 kilometers, remembering that this is a Canadian group, west of Salem. So it's a minor detail, but we're not Portland people. So anyway, I'm going to read from my book, Memory and Metaphor, and from what Beth tells me is her favorite chapter. And it takes place on a planet that's mostly desert, and you would have to read the book to find out why they are there. But I'll just go into it and let you guys fill in the rest with your imagination. They're on a planet called Mayhew. Days on Mayhew are short, about 10 standard hours. Sharon had watched the primary star race westward with disturbing speed. The sunset lasted only a few minutes, though the twilight was enough to see for another hour. Sharon had set the car to driverless operations and wondered if the car would be able to continue in that mode without headlights, as she had no intention of stopping. In contrast to the speedy primary star, the featureless landscape crawled by with agonizing slowness, even as Sharon tried to get the vehicle to speed up by force of will. She was living in a society which traveled between stars at many multiples the speed of light, but she was stuck going 30 kilometers an hour. She hadn't actually looked at the path the car was following for hours, but now she did and was surprised to see other sets of tire tracks in the sand. Did that mean we were going in the right direction? The sunset had brought a strong wind from the west, which pelted Sharon with sand. She tried to raise the roof on the ground car, but the railgun obstructed its path. Sharon tried to disassemble it, but no amount of pulling or turning or cranking would reveal how it came apart. She settled on placing a towel over Tegan's face and sitting with her back to the wind and wrapped a blanket around herself. The bag of artificial blood had emptied after 30 minutes, and the little device had withdrawn the needle, applied a dollop of dermal sealant, and remained inert. Sharon applied some antibiotic to the puncture wound and covered it to protect from the dust and sand. As twilight failed, Sharon shifted her eyeglasses to near infrared so that she could see the ground. And actually, I should have started my timer. I apologize. Where was I? As twilight failed, Sharon shifted her eyeglasses to near infrared so that she could see the ground in front of the car, which continued unfailingly southwards towards Wildside at a very steady, very frustrating 30 kilometers per hour. And since Kantaran hours were longer than Earth hours, the speed was even slower. The first settlers on the planet discovered that the diurnal period was 26 hours and 33 minutes long. That time period refers to another planet called Kantaris. Since they had no communication with Earth, and in order to keep the day 24 hours long, they simply divided diurnal period into 24 parts and called it an hour. Nobody cared that it was over 10% longer than a traditional hour. Since nobody used Earth-based clocks anymore, it wasn't an issue. At that speed, it would take Sharon nearly 2 days to drive to Wildside. She tried overriding the damage limiting safety procedures, but the car stubbornly refused to comply, even after Sharon explained to it that Tegan would die in mere hours if the car remained soullessly taciturn. She tried to get Tegan to drink water, which was a tedious job, placing a small amount in Tegan's mouth and hoping the swallow reflex would engage before the gag reflex did. She found more blankets on somebody's backpack and covered the Herman, who moaned and stirred, and Sharon hoped that it was a sign that Tegan was improving. Sharon herself was feeling quite depressed and recognized this as partly due to survivor's guilt. They had started the day with 5 in their group, 6 if you counted Aster, and now it was that was just the 2 of them. Perhaps she'd be the lone survivor before she reached Wildside. Had she brought them all to their deaths? One fact which she could not which could not be ignored was that she had woken up in a sick bay, that she hadn't, if she hadn't woken up in a sick bay of the Zephyr, all these people would still be alive and whole. She even felt guilt for Etta's demise. Radio signals detected, the eyeglasses informed her. What? Sharon's attention was instantly sharp. Where from? Can you resolve them? The eyeglasses seemed to consider this and offered an option to tap into the car's transceiver. Do it, Sharon ordered. The signal was very staticky, but Sharon thought she could hear the voice of a pip in the background. Hello, Sharon said. Aster, is that you? More static. Aster, this is Sharon. The car is damaged. Tegan is seriously injured. The others are missing. Can you help? Still more static. Signal lost, the eyeglasses reported. Sharon slammed her fist down repeatedly on the seat cushion and screamed. She only stopped screaming when the eyeglasses flashed a signal in Tegan's medical window. Alert, patient experiencing difficulty breathing. Alert, patient experiencing difficulty breathing. Sharon tossed off the blanket and jumped to Tegan's side. She couldn't see much because eyeglasses were still in the wrong spectrum. She switched back to the visible spectrum and turned on an overhead lamp attached to the roll bar under the railgun. The Herman's face looked unbalanced, and she noticed the distended neck veins. What's going on? Give me a report. Patient is experiencing cyanosis and displaying hypotension. Probable cause, tension pneumothorax. Sharon only paused a heartbeat. What do I do for it? In the trauma kit, you will find a needle for relieving pneumothorax. Now, look now, the eyeglasses ordered. She opened the kit again, and the green luminous arrow appeared. She dug around, following the arrow, until she found highlighted kit with the words needle thoracostomy on it. She opened the kit and found directions written in several languages, but she didn't have any time for this. What now? She asked the medical AI. Open the kit and take out the device, which is a needle, a cannula, and a valve, and you'll find an adjustment for the length. I see it, Sharon said. For this patient, set the needle length to 38.1 millimeters. Sharon spun the ratcheting dial until the correct numbers lined up with an indicator. Okay. Swab the patient's chest with an antiseptic. Sharon pulled off the medical blanket and opened Tegan's overalls again. Where? The second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Once again, the medical processor thoughtfully provided an overlay of the area to be swabbed. Sharon located the area and swabbed it with a spray and a disposable wipe. Even though Tegan was unconscious, the Herman was clearly in distress. Okay, now what? Insert the needle perpendicular to the chest wall at the level of the superior border of the third rib, all the way to the stop on the needle. A crosshair appeared at the appropriate spot. Sorry, Tegan, this is gonna hurt like hell. Sharon removed the protective cap from the needle and raised her arm in preparation to plunge the needle into the Herman's chest, and the car hit a severe bump that the already damaged suspension wasn't able to compensate for. She was momentarily airborne and fell on her keister. Son of a! Sharon screamed and rubbed her butt. What did we hit? There was an unexpected and undetected variation in the z-axis of the planetary surface, the eyeglasses informed her uselessly. You mean we hit a bump in the road? You could have said that. The glasses didn't have a programmed response to that admonition. Sharon stood and looked back at the direction that they'd come from. What's that noise? Unknown. Sharon switched her eyeglasses back to near infrared and saw something that made her heart jump into high gear. From a large quote unquote variation in the z-axis, creatures were crawling out of the ground and took flight. After buzzing continuously for a moment, they seemed to sight in on the lights of the ground car and started to give chase. What are those? Sharon asked. Those are locally known as ground wasps, the eyeglasses said. They are burrowing insectoids with 5 body sections, measuring a total of about 1 meter in length. They remain dormant during the dry seasons, but will emerge if disturbed. They are quick to anger and have stingers that are 15 centimeters long. They'll want to harvest the water from your body. They have been known to kill and dissect large imported mammals, such as sheep and cattle. There have been 7 recorded deaths due to ground wasps. How fast can they fly? According to the local database, their flight has been clocked at between 30 and 35 kilometers per hour. Judging by their approach, Sharon estimated that these were closer to the 35-kilometer-per-hour variety and that the closest would overtake them in about 20 seconds. Sharon didn't even take time to think about it. She turned and plunged a needle into Tegan's chest and opened the valve and was rewarded with a rush of air and some blood. Tegan's discomfort immediately decreased and his breathing became much more relaxed. Sharon closed the valve, recovered Tegan with the medical blanket and reached over to her backpack to pull out a cutlass and a shotgun. I have had it with this planet up to my fucking eyeballs, she said angrily, walking to the back of the car. She aimed the shotgun with her left hand, waited for the wasp to come within killing distance, and pulled the trigger. The shotgun nearly leapt out of her hand with the recoil, and the wasp pretty much disintegrated in an explosion of bug guts. It would have been nice if the other wasp had taken that as a warning and backed off, but Sharon knew that that's not how insects reacted. If anything, they were further agitated by the smell of their comrade's demise. The eerie green image of another wasp came from another angle. Sharon adjusted her aim, pulled the trigger again, and the second insect exploded. How far would they chase her? Sharon had no idea. She aimed for the third bug, which had assumed an attack profile by aiming its stinger at Sharon's head. A third gunshot, and a third wasp gone. Numbers 4 and 5 came in together. Sharon half wondered if they were intentionally changing tactics, but convinced herself that it had to be a coincidence. She had to settle with shooting number 4 before it was within optimal distance, and instead of exploding, it simply fluttered to the ground. Her next shot was too quickly aimed and missed. She adjusted again, and number 5 came closer than Sharon ever wanted to be to an angry wasp of any size from any planet before she could change her aim and fire again. This time she felt some splatter of bug blood. Was it her imagination, or did it feel acidic? She quickly and with some creeping panic wiped the gore from her face with the sleeve of her coveralls. She was out of shells and would have to reload, but she didn't have time. To make things worse, an icon started to flash on her peripheral vision. Capacitor charge low, please recharge. Capacitor charge low, please recharge. I don't believe this, she shouted. Seriously? There seemed to be only one wasp left chasing them. The rest had probably given up and gone home, but number 6 was determined. Number 6 was too clever for its own good. Instead of trying to attack Sharon straight on with a speed differential of only 5 kph, it remained outside the effective range of the shotgun and flew ahead of the car to a point where Sharon could just barely see it and turned around. This time the speed differential would be 65 kph. Shit. Sharon dropped the gun, ran to the front of the car, and jumped onto the hood. She would have to time this perfectly. The green glow was increasing in size rapidly. Sharon tensed, ready to slice through the wasp with a single swing. And the eyeglasses went dark. And Sharon swung the blade, felt it hit something, and the energy of the collision knocked her back into the passenger section of the car. The wasp landed on top of her, obviously mortally wounded, but its wings still fluttered. She felt the bug's legs crawling at her clothes. She pulled back on the cutlass and took several more swings, slicing the insect's body until it stopped moving. She felt gooey liquid on her clothes. She pushed the bug off, stood up, and removed the eyeglasses. In the light of the overhead lamp, she could see it there on the floor of the car, looking like some psychopath's nightmare. Sharon kicked it. Let that be a lesson to you, bug, she said. Don't fuck with the humans. She kicked it again for good measure. HUD disconnect detected, said a voice on the radio speaker. Sharon realized that it was reacting to her eyeglasses disconnecting from the local network and had shifted to audio mode. This was a real disadvantage with the eyeglasses. Her EPU wouldn't run out of capacitor charge. Now would be a good time for it to come back online, but she had taken drugs to ensure that it wouldn't happen. Route obstruction ahead, the autopilot said, recalculating route. To Sharon's dismay, the car came to a halt. She pulled out the flashlight and shined it in the direction of the erstwhile travel. Being unable to see much, she climbed back into the hood and stood there, holding the light over her head and aimed forward. The obstruction came into view. It was a very wide ditch, a ravine really. It was wide enough that the flashlight beam did not illuminate the other side. The ravine ran nearly perpendicular to their travel, and there was no visible means of crossing it. Sharon looked around for the other set of wheel prints and didn't see anything. Maybe they diverged during the battle with the bugs. Without any warning, the car started up again, going backwards, and Sharon's inertia caused her to tumble shoulder first onto the hood, and then over it, where she landed with a breath-stealing thump on the hard ground. A pain shot through her right arm, and Sharon desperately hoped that nothing was broken. Resetting route, the car said belatedly, resuming travel. No, Karen shouted as she pushed herself off the ground with one good arm and started running off after the car. Unfortunately, the car was able to travel just as fast backwards as forward, and though 30 kph was agonizingly slow under normal conditions, it was still far faster than Sharon could sprint. Sharon felt a panic rise in her stomach as she realized she was being easily outpaced. However, the car turned, performing a sharp 180, which gave Sharon just enough time to catch up. She leapt for the door and was able to grab the top of it with her good hand, and the car came to another stop and then started forward again, directly backwards, directly back towards the wasp's nest. Stop, you fool car, Sharon shouted, but the car ignored her. She needed the interface in order to effect its operation remotely. And I think that's it. That's my 15 minutes.
Thank you very much there, Andrea. Herb, are you ready? Or do we can come back to you at the very end?
Can't we do question and answer now?
Yep. Anybody have any questions and answers for Andrea?
You go, yeah,
Oh.
through the space bar.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. I loved the tone, or whatever that's called, the register, you know, of your story. I really like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can see why that would be somebody's favorite chapter. There's so much going on.
It was exhausting to write.
You did a great job reading it.
Thank you.
Everyone, I invite you to unmute and go ahead and chat with our feature.
We're muted now, right?
So Herb was unable to reestablish connection, or?
I don't know, but we'll come back to him at the very end. Does anybody else have any other questions for Andrea?
Could you just read some more? Keep reading.
We do have other pills to read, so anybody else have any other questions for Andrea?
I know Angus is here to admire, I think, friends, right? Oh,
Friends of Herb's.
Angus is friends with Herb?
Yeah. Okay, no other questions for Andrea?
Well, I have one question.
Okay.
Sure.
I came in, but I got here unfortunately late. So is this a chapter of a book that you've written?
Yes, it's
And
published. Yes.
Wow. What's it called?
Memory and Metaphor.
Memory and Metaphor.
Yes.
Oh, thanks, Andrea.
And if you look up my name under Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you should be able to find it.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.